Hi, this is NextGen Picks. Let me ask you something honestly. When was the last time you bought a piece of portable audio gear from one of the big three and genuinely felt like you were holding next generation tech? You know exactly who I'm talking about. Those legacy giants that dominate retail shelves. I'm not talking about a new paint job, a marginally bigger battery, or a louder bass boost button. I mean real innovation, the kind that actually justifies the extra $200 they tack onto the price just for the logo. If you've been walking around with the sense that the big brands are starting to coast, charging a legacy tax, while smaller, hungrier engineering teams are absolutely running circles around them with better tech, superior codecs, and real acoustic breakthroughs for less money, you're not imagining it. This is happening right now in 2026, and it's speeding up fast. We just finished putting the latest wave of portable speakers through the ringer, and the results were genuinely surprising. The heavyweights are getting rocked. But before we call out who's pretending and who's actually delivering, do me a huge favor. If you value independent testing that doesn't read straight from a marketing script, hit that like button and subscribe to NextGen Picks right now. It's the only way we keep these lights on without taking brand money. All right, let's look at the data. All right, if we're going to talk about outdating the kings, we have to start with the physics. Every speaker manufacturer on the planet is fighting the same enemy, air pressure. To get deep, chest-thumping bass, you traditionally need a massive cabinet to move a massive amount of air. That's why your home theater subwoofer is a giant wooden cube, and your portable Bluetooth speaker usually sounds like a tin can when you try to play anything with real sub-bass. But then there's the Brain X. I know what you're thinking, Chris. It looks like a toaster. And yeah, it's not exactly the sleekest thing in the world, but inside this 7.7 lb beast is something called an RA, Repel Attract Driver. While Bose and Sony are still using traditional magnets and passive radiators to fake bass, Brain used a system of custom magnets to cancel out internal air pressure. In plain English, this thing hits 27.1 Hertz. Let that sink in. Most portable speakers, even the big ones like the Bose SoundLink Max, start rolling off and losing power around 50 or 60 Hertz. The Brain X is reaching frequencies that you don't just hear, you feel in your solar plexus. When I played Silent Shout by the Knife on this, my entire desk started migrating across the floor. It was actually terrifying. But look, I'll be honest with you, it's sunshine and sub-bass. Here's where it gets weird. For a $500 speaker, the user experience is, well, it's frustrating. There are no physical play, pause, or skip buttons. None. If you want to pause your music, you have to reach for your phone or shout at Alexa. In 2026, that feels like a massive oversight. And while it's IP57 rated, meaning it can handle a splash, it's heavy enough that if it falls into a pool, it's going straight to the bottom like a brick. This is exactly why I do these deep dives. On paper, the Brain X is an engineering miracle. In reality, it's a specialized tool for the person who cares about bass above everything else, even convenience. But before we move on to the speaker that actually gives you 90% of this performance for literally half the price, I want to hear from you. What's the one piece of tech you've bought recently that actually lived up to the hype? Or better yet, what's the one brand you're officially done with? Drop a comment below. I read every single one, and your feedback literally dictates which products I buy for the next round of testing. Now, if $500 for a bass toaster feels like a midlife crisis you're not ready for, let's talk about where the math actually starts to make sense for most of us. Enter the Soundcore Motion 600. This is the speaker that makes Sony's mid-range lineup look like it's stuck in 2022. While Sony is still trying to sell you on Mia bass and live sound modes that just muffle the mids, Soundcore threw 5 separate amplifiers and 5 drivers into this chassis, including an upward-firing SkyDriver for spatial audio. And look, I'm usually the first guy to call spatial audio a gimmick in a portable speaker. It usually just sounds like a cheap reverb effect, but on the X600, it's different. It actually widens the soundstage to the point where you'd swear there are 2 speakers sitting on your shelf. Here's the insider secret. Out of the box, the X600 is fine. It's good. But once you open their app and use the 9-band EQ to pull back the slightly harsh 2 kHz peak and bump the sub-bass, it becomes a giant killer. It supports LDEC, which is the high-res codec the legacy brands often reserve for their flagship models. Sony charges you a style premium for a handle and some LEDs. Soundcore is giving you actual high-fidelity components for under $200. But wait, don't go buying the Soundcore just yet, because if you're the type of person who actually takes their speaker outside, like really outside where there's sand, mud, and the occasional 5FT drop onto concrete, the big three still have one card left to play. And that card is the brand new 2026 JBL Charge 6. JBL knows they're being chased. They know the new guard is faster and cheaper. So for 2026, they stopped messing around with just louder and started focusing on smarter. The Charge 6 is finally ditching the old party boost protocol for Auracast. This is a big deal and nobody is talking about it. Auracast is the new Bluetooth standard that allows you to broadcast audio to an unlimited number of speakers. You could have 50 of these things scattered across a beach, all perfectly synced with zero lag. Sony and Bose are still lagging behind with proprietary daisy chain tech that only works with their specific models from the last 2 years. They also added AI sound boost. Marketing fluff usually, but our testing showed that at 90% volume, the point where most speakers start to clip and sound like garbage, the Charge 6 actually sounds cleaner than the Charge 5 did. It's using a real-time algorithm to predict driver excursion and prevent distortion before it happens. It's the first time I felt like JBL's engineering team actually earned their paycheck in a long time. However, there's always a however with legacy brands. The Charge 6 is still a mono speaker, one woofer, one tweeter. In a world where Soundcore is giving you true stereo and spatial audio for less money, JBL is still betting that you'll pay for the indestructible build quality and the JBL sound signature. And then we have Bose. Oh, Bose. The SoundLink Max is their attempt to reclaim the premium title. It feels incredible. The silicone wrap is like velvet. The rope handle is a vibe. But when you look at the fine print, it starts to fall apart. No Wi-Fi, no Auracast, no high-res codec support for iPhone users beyond the standard AAC. You are paying $400 for a very pretty, very loud, very basic Bluetooth speaker. It's the iPhone of speakers, but without the ecosystem benefits. If you just want something that looks expensive and just works, the Max is fine. But if you want the 2026 tech we were promised, Bose is still living in 2021. This brings us to a massive recurring theme we saw in 2026 testing: app fatigue. Sony, Bose, and even Sonos have started locking basic features behind mandatory account registrations. I'm not kidding. We had a unit that wouldn't let us adjust the EQ until we verified an email address. Meanwhile, companies like Triet and Soundcore are just letting you play music. It's a weird world when the budget brands feel more premium because they actually respect your time. Speaking of respecting your wallet, we have to talk about the Triet Stormbox Blast 2. If you want pure, unadulterated volume for the backyard, this is where the legacy brands should be terrified. It's a massive, heavy, RGB lit monster that puts out more raw dB than speakers twice its price. Is it refined? No. Does it have audiophile nuance? Absolutely not. But at a summer barbecue, nobody cares about total harmonic distortion. They care about the bass hitting their chest. And that's the split we're seeing in 2026. The market is dividing into two camps: the tech-forward innovators who are pushing codecs and driver physics, and the legacy giants who are coasting on brand recognition while charging you for tech that's 3 years old. But which one should you actually buy? Because louder isn't always better, and cheaper can sometimes mean broken in 6 months. Wait until you see what happened when we took these into the real-world testing phase, because that's where the marketing materials finally stopped talking, and the hardware had to prove itself. Look, I've seen the spec sheets, I've read the glossy brochures, but if there's one thing I've learned after a decade in this industry, it's that marketing watts and real-world volume are two different languages. Manufacturers love to shout about 200 watts of peak power, but they never tell you what happens to the audio fidelity when you actually try to use that power at a backyard party with 30 people talking over it. Let's start with the Tribit Stormbox Blast 2. This is the speaker that single-handedly destroyed the value proposition of the JBL Boombox series. On paper, it's a monster. 200 watts when plugged into the wall, 180 watts on battery. That is a massive amount of headroom. But here's the insider truth: they don't put in the Amazon listing. This thing is a physical liability. It weighs nearly 20 lb. I'm not joking. If you're planning on porting this thing more than 50 ft from your car to the beach, you better have been hitting the gym. I took this on a half-mile hike to a lake spot, and by the time I got there, I wasn't in the mood for music. I was in the mood for a nap and some Advil. The handle is solid, but it's thick, and after 10 minutes it digs into your palm. This is portable, in the same way a microwave is portable. But, and this is a big but, once you set it down and turn it on, the value-to-performance ratio is terrifying. In 2026, finding a speaker that includes professional-grade 6.35mm inputs for dual microphones with independent volume and reverb control is unheard of at this price point. Usually you have to buy a dedicated PA system for that. Tribit just threw it in. I know what you're thinking, Chris. I don't care about karaoke. Neither did I, until I realized that those same inputs make this a godsend for street performers or anyone who needs a quick battery-powered PA system for an event. Here's the quirk, though. If you use the X-Bass mode while running the microphones, the DSP digital processing system starts to get confused. It tries to prioritize the vocal clarity, which ends up ducking the music so aggressively that it sounds like your favorite track is being played through a pillow. You have to manually dive into the app to balance the gain, which, shocker, isn't explained anywhere in the manual. Now let's pivot to the smart side of the fence with the Sonos Move 2. This is the speaker for the person who wants the best of both worlds. It's got Wi-Fi 6 for the house and Bluetooth 5.0 for the patio. It's $440, which is a lot of money, but it's the only speaker in this lineup that actually understands where it is. It's called Auto True Play. Every time you move the speaker, the internal microphones listen to the echo of the room and recalibrate the EQ in about 30 seconds. I tested this by moving it from a wide-open kitchen to a cramped tiled bathroom. Most speakers would sound like a boomy, muddy mess in that bathroom. The Move 2, it pulled the bass back just enough to keep the vocals crisp. It's genuinely impressive tech that makes Bose's fixed tuning look ancient. But here's the stuff they don't tell you in the Sonos marketing material. Let's talk about the ghost drain. I've had dozens of emails from viewers complaining that they leave their Move 2 fully charged, they turn it off, and 3 days later it's dead. Why? Because Sonos doesn't really have a hard-off switch. It has a sleep mode. Even when it's supposed to be powered down, the Wi-Fi card is still listening for the Sonos app to wake it up. If you don't manually hold the power button for a full 5 seconds until you hear the specific shutdown chime, it's going to bleed battery life like an open wound. And let's talk about that battery. In 2026, we should be past the point where a $450 speaker becomes a paperweight after 3 years of heavy use. To Sonos's credit, the battery is use replaceable, but the replacement kit costs $80. $80. That's nearly the price of a whole Soundcore speaker just for the battery. It's a trust bomb moment. They give you repairability, but they tax you for the privilege. While we're on the subject of hardware traps, let's talk about the invisible spec, Bluetooth 5.4. Look at the back of most Bose or Sony speakers sitting on shelves right now. Most of them are still rocking Bluetooth 5.0 or 5.2 in 2026. That is a massive red flag. Chris, why does it matter? It still connects, right? Yeah, it connects, but you're missing out on LE audio and the LC3 codec. If you have a modern smartphone, anything from the last 2 years, your phone is capable of sending a much higher quality signal using much less power. The new guard brands like Soundcore and Tribit have jumped on 5.44 because it allows for multi-point connectivity that actually works. We've all been there. You're listening to music on your laptop, your phone rings, and you have to go into the settings. Disconnect, reconnect. It's a mess. With the 5.4 standard on these newer models, the transition is invisible. It's these quality of life features that make the legacy brands feel like they're selling you a 2018 experience in a 2026 shell. And then there's the bass trap. I spent a week with the Sony ULT series, Sony's latest attempt to win back the youth market. They have this giant ULT button on the top. You press it and the bass becomes, well, it becomes too much. It's designed for a retail floor. It's designed so you walk into a Best Buy, hear it for 10 seconds and think, wow, that's powerful. but try listening to a podcast or a vocal-heavy track with that mode on. It sounds like the narrator is speaking from inside a submarine. Sony is betting that you won't notice the lack of mid-range clarity if they just vibrate your floorboards enough. It's a classic marketing trick. Hide the cheap drivers behind a wall of digital bass boost. One last unmanual detail before we move into the grouping phase. The charging lie. Many of these high-power speakers like the Triet and the JBL Boombox tell you they support USB-C charging. Technically they do, but read the fine print. If you use a standard phone charger, it can take up to 12 hours to charge these massive batteries. If you want the fast charge they brag about in the ads, you usually have to use the bulky AC brick cable that comes in the box. So much for a one cable for everything lifestyle. I know I'm being hard on them, but you're here because you want to know what it's actually like to live with these things, not just what the influencer who got a free unit for a weekend thinks. We're about to move into the final phase. I'm going to tell you exactly which speaker is for which person, and I'm going to give you my definitive best overall and best value for 2026. Because at the end of the day, your money is hard-earned, and you shouldn't have to spend it on a brand name that stopped innovating 3 years ago. Wait until you see the winner of the value category. It's a speaker that most of you have probably never heard of, but it's currently sitting in my living room because it beat out a $400 Bose in a blind A/B test. Look, I know your head is probably spinning with decib, codecs, and frequency response graphs. That's exactly what the marketing departments want. They want to bury you in spec soup so you just give up and buy the brand you recognize. But we're not doing that today. Let's break this down into the only 3 categories that actually matter for your real life. First, we have the audiophile purist. This is for the person who actually sits down and listens to music. You aren't just throwing on a playlist for background noise while you do the dishes. You're listening for the timbre of the snare drum and the texture of the bass guitar. If that's you, the Brain X is in a league of its own. It's the only speaker in this lineup that fundamentally changes the physics of portable sound. When you hear that rappel, a track driver hit notes that a Bose or Sony literally cannot physically reproduce, you realize how much you've been missing. It makes the big guys look like they've been selling us toys for the last decade. But remember, it's $499. It's heavy, and the capacity of buttons will make you want to throw it out a window. It's a high-maintenance relationship, but the sound, it's soul-stirring. Next up, the Rugged Explorer. This is for the person whose speaker lives in a backpack, a cup holder, or the mud. You need something that can survive a literal hurricane and still play your podcasts. In 2026, the JBL Charge 6 is the undisputed king of this hill. Yes, it's mono. Yes, it lacks the spatial magic of the Soundcore, but the IQ68 rating, totally dustproof and waterproof, combined with the new Auracast support, means this is the most future-proof real-world speaker on the market. If you buy this, you aren't just buying a speaker, you're buying into a new ecosystem where you can sync with your friends' speakers at the beach, regardless of the brand, as long as they also have 2026 tech. It's reliable, it's tough, and the battery playtime boost actually works when you're miles from a charger. Then there's the smart value seeker. This is the person who refuses to pay a $200 logo tax for a brand that hasn't innovated since the pandemic. You want 90% of the performance for 40% of the price. The Soundcore Motion 600 is the speaker that should keep the CEOs of Bose and Sony awake at night. For under $200, you get 5 drivers, high-res LDAC support, and a spatial audio engine that actually creates a soundstage. It makes the $399 Bose SoundLink Max look like an overpriced relic from a bygone era. All right, it's time for the verdict. If I'm standing in your shoes with your hard-earned money on the line, here is how the math breaks down for the best of 2026. The Best Value Award goes to the Soundcore Motion X600. Look, it's not even a fair fight when you look at the price-to-performance ratio. Soundcore is providing a level of acoustic detail and codec support that the legacy brands are gatekeeping behind their premium lines. If you want a speaker that sounds expensive without the credit card debt, this is the one. Period. The best overall award, the king of 2026, is the Brain AI Brain X. I know. It's $499. It's expensive. But best doesn't mean cheapest. It means the speaker that pushes the industry forward. The Brain X is the only speaker here that made me say, how is that possible? When the bass kicked in. It has successfully outdated the entire portable lineups of JBL, Sony, and Bose by proving that you don't need a giant box to get giant sound. It is a technological masterpiece. But here is the truth bomb I promised you. The biggest lie in the tech industry isn't that a product is new. It's that you need it to be happy. Most of the speakers sitting on your shelves right now from 2023 or 2024 still sound great. But if you are in the market, if your old speaker is dying or you're ready for a genuine upgrade, don't let the big brands trick you with legacy marketing. The giants are resting on their laurels. They're hoping you'll buy the name on the box instead of looking at the specs inside. They're charging you for Bluetooth 5.0 and basic AAC codecs, while the new guard is giving you 5.4, Auracast, and sub 30 Hz bass. Don't fall for the legacy tax. If you want to make sure you're getting the actual 2026 revisions and not some old stock they're trying to clear out, I've put the vetted SafePath links in the description below. I've personally verified those listings to ensure you're getting the latest hardware with the updated chips we talked about today. Buying through those links is the best way to support this channel and keep our testing completely independent. We don't take review units from brands that come with strings attached. We buy this gear so we can tell you the truth even when it hurts their bottom line. This is NextGen Picks. Thank you for trusting me with your time and, more importantly, your wallet. I'll see you in the next deep dive.